President ŠUICA and Commissioner Johansson. Vice President, you will start with the college readout, and then we go to the theme of the press conference. Go ahead.
Thank you, Eric. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our college readout. College adopted the proposal to combat the sexual abuse and sexual exploitation of children, which Commissioner Johansson and I will present to you shortly. We also agreed on two communications under the European Green Deal. The first presents the College recommendation for 2040 emissions reduction target and the next possible steps on the path towards climate neutrality by 2050. The second one concerns industrial carbon management and sets out the potential contribution of carbon capture, storage and use to meeting the future 2040 targets. Executive Vice President Maroš Šefčovič and the Commissioner Kadri Himson and Wopke Hoekstra will be here in this room to present both communications at 4:30. Finally, the College partially registered European Citizens Initiative titled European Cannabis Initiative. Let me remind you that at this stage the Commission has not analysed the substance of the proposal. Our registration means that the organisers of today's initiative can now start gathering the 1 million signatures that are required for each initiative to move forward. If the initiative is successful and gathers the minimum support of citizens necessary, the Commission will then have to react. And let us now pass to our main topic of today on directive. So today the Commission adopted a proposal to update the directive on child sexual abuse and sexual exploitation. An estimated 1 in 5 children in the European Union are suffering from some form of sexual abuse and exploitation. The crime, hence the manifest child abuse, is rising in numbers and evolving over the past years. As an example, in 2020, 1 million cases of child sexual abuse were reported, while by 2022 the numbers have risen to 1.5 million reported cases. Child sexual abuse is heinous crime against the most vulnerable, and it often happens within their most trusted circle. About 75% of the victims know their abusers. It has lifelong consequences. In many ways, this is a trauma that may never end. New technologies and the digital era we live in have unfortunately increased the threat and the abuse, both offline and online. Through the revised 2011 Directive on combating child abuse and exploitation, the Child Sexual Abuse Directive, we are updating our legal measures and concrete binding actions to fight child sexual abuse in all its forms, to be fit for the purpose. We close the gaps, we improve our criminal law response, we address the new threats, including those of the digital age, in order to effectively prevent, prosecute and fight this terrible crime, to bring justice, protection and long-term support to child victims. Our key updates also oblige Member States to ensure improved access to child-friendly justice and better suited child protection systems. We will continue our work to step up the effective protection of our younger generation as we prepare our upcoming initiative in March on integrated child protection systems. We would all wish that these crimes would not happen in the first place, that our children are never exposed to these terrible crimes. This is why awareness raising across all levels of society is key. And of course it must include everyone. Children and young people, parents, caregivers, teachers, educators, policymakers, the industry, and of course from the offline and the online risks. If we tell our children to be careful talking to strangers in the streets, we must apply same online. Today, as all of you know, is the Safer Internet Day. And while the Internet, as all of us know, has opened unprecedented opportunities, it also brings about big, huge risks. We ask our Member States to help us. We ask them to invest in awareness raising. We ask them to ensure that the internet is safer and better for children and young people. And of course, we must not give up, because every child deserves protection. Not only every child deserves protection, but every child deserves protection everywhere in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner.
Thank you, and thank you also, Dubravka, for lining out the main things in our recast directive. One of the first things I did when I was appointed Commissioner was to present a strategy to fight child sexual abuse. And this is what we are presenting today is the last deliverables of that strategy, and this has been high on my agenda for the whole period. I will give you a few examples on this recast of the directive and why it's important that we update it. One is the definition of the child sexual abuse material. With the high speed of development on the digital era, we really need to keep up the pace. So, for example, now we are also defining generative AI, see some products. We are also putting more definitions that comes from the digital, the new digital technologies that is emerging. Doing it in a way that will be future-proof, so we don't have to update it all the time. We have also new technology. Another thing that we are now that we are criminalizing in our proposals are the so-called pedophile handbooks. I would like to tell you one example. I met with Marcel 1.5 years ago. He visited me in my office. He told me how a neighbor had abused his daughter from when she was 1 up to she was 3 years old. She's been tied down, she's been raped, and the perpetrator filmed the rapes and shared the videos online. Some of these videos are still circulated. The girl is 15 years old now. Ever since this happened, Marcel had been a tireless campaigner against child sexual abuse, and especially against the so-called pedophile handbooks that are now criminalized in 2 of our member states. Now we propose to criminalize them all over the European Union. What is a pedophile handbook? It gives clear instructions on how to seduce children, how to make the children keep the secret, to avoid the DNA and other trace evidence during sexual contact. It also includes the specific language, how to come closer to a child, with examples of sentences. It gives example also how you can come closer to the parents and what kind of roles you can use to do that, the language you can use to be able to have access to the child. There are also concrete examples on how far you can penetrate a 2-year-old before she starts bleeding compared to a 4-year-old, for example, and how to avoid being traced online. We will not now make these kind of so-called pedophile handbooks criminal in the whole European Union. Another important thing is that we change the statute of limitations. As Dubravka just said, very often children are being abused by somebody close, somebody they trust. It's very often a member of the family, could be a priest, could be a football trainer, could be a neighbor. One example, Sarah was a young ice skater when she was raped during 2 years by her coach, who kept her under hold. She had 30 years of repressed memory and many other psychological hardships that made it impossible for her to report. When she was finally able to speak, it was too late because of the statute of limitations in France. Nanou was 18 months old when she began to be sexually abused by 3 priests. Each day, she lived in distress and fear of the perpetrator's visits. During 13 years, they raped her hundreds of times. At the age of 13, she flew from her home to escape them and began working in a factory. Years later, when she was strong enough to report, even though one of the perpetrators was still alive, it was too late because of the statute of limitations. Now, we will make sure that in all EU member states, the statute of limitations will start running first when the child is at the age of majority, and that they are long enough, 20 or 30 years, to make sure that this traumatized experience that very often takes a long time before a person is ready to speak out, that the perpetrator can still be prosecuted. The last thing I would like to highlight in our proposal, there are a lot of different things in there, of course, is the support and protection of the victims. And here also the new EU Centre Against Child Sexual Abuse that I have proposed earlier will play a very significant role. It's important that these victims are meeting a child-friendly environment, a child-friendly justice environment, and that they will have the support they need for as long as they need it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for us today following this proposal from the College? That is not the case. Thank you very much.